Good morning, everyone. I also would like to disclose that I have no conflicts of interest, no direct ties to the fossil fuel industry or other polluting industries. And frankly, I wonder why everyone, not just in this room, but in these halls, is not taking the time to declare the same. I also want to just first up acknowledge how complicated all of this sounds. It's all very technical. All of these updates that we've just heard from all of my colleagues are, I think, just illustrate how significantly difficult it is to understand anything that's happening in almost any one of these rooms on almost any one of these agenda items. I have to admit, I often don't know exactly what's happening myself, and this is coming from someone who's followed these negotiations for over a decade. And in fact, I still have nightmares about my first Article 6 negotiations some years ago, where I came close to crying trying to understand exactly what everything meant. So everything that's in these halls feels very technical, very confusing, and very complicated. And I think it's really important that we first understand that this is by design. It's everything that's happening in these halls, everything that's being debated in seemingly foreign, never-before-heard languages in all of these negotiating rooms is part of a carefully orchestrated plan to create a fake alternate reality that creates a complete disconnect from the reality of the world that we're all living and the climate crisis that we're all experiencing outside of these halls. This is an intentional plan to create disconnect from the typhoons that are currently happening in the Philippines while we are here, where hundreds of people are dying, and many activists here are not even sure if their families are safe or if they'll come home to a community that was the same as it left. This is a plan to create intentional disconnect from the trillions of dollars that are being spent annually on war and fossil fuel genocide in Palestine, but also other places around the world. This is an intentional plan to create disconnect from the wildfires, from the floods, from the grabbed lands, from the harm caused all around the world by the very same actors that are here creating this disconnect. This process has been designed this way, and it's really not a coincidence. This is an intentional and carefully orchestrated illusion crafted by the very same countries that are most responsible for climate change and most responsible for the past 3 decades of blocking progress to address it. I'm talking about global north countries like the United States, governments like the European Union, Norway, Australia, New Zealand, have all caused the emissions and profited off of those emissions increasing activities at the expense of people across the world, particularly global south communities, frontline communities, and indigenous peoples. So if it's helpful, I'm going to try to spell out a little bit clearly in layperson terms some of what's happening here and just underscore some of what my colleagues have shared in much more depth. What's happening here at COP30 is the systematic denial of the trillions of dollars that is overdue in climate debt by the global north countries to the global south. This debt is not charity. It's not kindness, it's owed, and it's long overdue. But this is being denied, withdrawn, and drawn back across all elements of finance discussions here. There's then the systematic withdrawal of all other forms of meaningful finance that's public, people-centered, in the control of communities, and instead, the rolling out and ramping up of carbon markets and other climate finance schemes that only allow these countries and other polluters to continue to pollute and continue to profit off of these pollution. And then, of course, there's the pretense of the TFFF, which, as we've heard, is nothing but riddled with loopholes and another attempt to profit off of nature. This is all well at home. These same global north countries are not actually doing things to decrease emissions or to do their fair share of climate action, but are actually scaling up fossil fuel production and other things. Just last week, research by Oil Change International showed that actually just 4 global north countries have derailed oil and gas phase-out since the Paris Agreement. And these 4 countries have increased their oil and gas production by 40% between 2015, when the Paris Agreement was agreed, and last year. The rest of the world, just for comparison, in this time, has a combined oil and gas decrease of 2%. Who are we talking about? Who are these countries that are to blame? Well, it's not those we might be hearing being blamed in these negotiating rooms. Again, it's the global north. And these 4 countries that are most responsible for derailing climate action through their increased production of fossil fuels at home are Canada, Australia, Norway, and the United States. Which brings me to the United States. Let's talk about them, because they're not here, right? No, that's incorrect. Let's be clear. The United States has always been the largest blocker of climate action at home and abroad, and they have always been the biggest bully. They may not be officially here, but they are very here in all of the ways that matter, undermining action, and the fact that they don't have an official delegation doesn't change that. They're here as the biggest donors to the World Bank, which is now the interim trustee and host of both the TFFF as well as the Loss and Damage Fund. So they hold the purse strings as some of the biggest parts of climate action. And at home, they're also using tariffs and economic sanctions to weaponize climate action and to prevent other countries from being able to take the action they need to domestically to respond to the climate crisis. So the US is very much here. They've taken off the gloves and they're ready to throw down, as are their other comrades, the Canada, Australia, Norway, and the EU. But finally, it's also really important we understand that it is not only countries who are being allowed here to do dirty at COP30. You could be forgiven for thinking when you walk through the pavilions that we are at a corporate trade show, because it's easy to think that way. We have one of the world's biggest industrial agriculture polluters as a diamond sponsor of the agribusiness zone, and we have many other examples of fossil fuel and big polluted interests being represented here. And in fact, Kick Big Polluters Out last week released research showing that between COP26 and COP29, more than thousands of lobbyists have attended the past climate talks, fossil fuel lobbyists. They are overrunning this place. They are everywhere. They are in the whispering in the ears of delegates. They are in rooms that even we don't have access to. And just 90 of these oil and gas corporations that have attended recent COPs are responsible for nearly 60% of oil and gas production in 2024. So what are they doing here? And if global north countries aren't getting serious about doing their fair share of climate action, what are they doing here? It's time to step up. It's time to kick big polluters out. It's time for global north countries to do their long overdue fair share and to crack that disconnect between the real world that's outside these halls and the carefully orchestrated artificial reality inside these halls. Thank you.